Welcome, book talk enthusiasts, to another exciting episode of Dragons and Spaceships, where we shine a spotlight on all the sci-fi and fantasy books that are taking the platform by storm. I'm your host, Brandi, and today we are shining a light on a gripping new release, The Widowing by Melanie Bacon. This book was just released on August 27th of this year, and it's the second installment of the Detectivist series. Not only are we going to go over this book today, but we also have a very special interview that I was able to do with Melanie Bacon that you will be able to listen to. We are going to unravel what makes this historical crime novel stand out, discuss its intriguing characters, and explore the unique blend of mystery and history that Melanie Bacon masterfully weaves together. But before we get into the episode, let's go ahead and listen to what Melanie has to say about the series. Welcome to Dungeons and Spaceships, Melanie. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Brandi. Thank you.
Good. It's such a pleasure to meet you and talk to you about this book. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. Okay, so why don't we get into some of these questions we have for you? So why don't you tell us who you are and how you got into writing, like past, present, future?
Okay, sure. So my name's Melanie. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I started writing many decades ago. And I had a newspaper column in the little town I lived in. And I also, this is going to show how old I am. I used to write for National Lampoon. I used to write this section in Lampoon called Letters from the Editors, which were these silly things. And I discovered in that whole process that really I had a kind of a affinity for humor writing and I've always viewed myself as a humor writer. And I wrote a number of books over the years that I had an agent for a period of time, but I couldn't get sold. And then I had, raising my kids, all that kind of stuff. And I came to kind of a crossroads the same day or the same week, maybe the same 24 hours that a publisher said, yes, we want to publish this book that you've written. It was a sci-fi romance, actually. That same period of time, I was offered a good job with benefits as a compensation professional. And I had kids to support. So I made that choice at that time.
Yep.
But that's just kind of the choices you make in life. And so, but over the years and that career did well. I continued to write and I have a number of books out. And so the one we're talking about today is the second book in a series. It's a historical mystery series. I like history. I like humor. I like mystery. It does all of those things.
And what inspired you to write this series?
This is a Sherlock Holmes spin, and I've always enjoyed Sherlock Holmes. My issue with Sherlock Holmes is there aren't enough female characters in the stories. And so that's kind of where I came up with this. And in this series, it's the sister of Sherlock Holmes, but John Watson, the person narrating the stories, is the daughter of Jack the Ripper. And so that's kind of the spin. So they are narrated by the daughter of Jack the Ripper.
That's so cool. What got you interested to do Jack the Ripper, that whole storyline?
I just was trying to think of who would be an interesting character. And of course, I think like a lot of people who are interested in Victorian history, I've always been interested in that phenomenon and the tragedy of it and the experience of the women's lives in Whitechapel at that time. So they just kind of merged for me. And I acknowledge that Jack the Ripper was a real person and we do not know who he was. I acknowledge right here, not in my books. We do not know who he was. Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character, all of that. But I'm blending reality and fiction in these stories.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. I was just in London in December and we didn't have time, but I wanted to do the Jack the Ripper tour so bad. And now I'm wishing I would have. Even more.
Yeah, no, I want to do that too. I have not been to London since I started all this. I shall do the Jack the Ripper tour.
Absolutely. Manifest that.
Yes, exactly.
Great. What is the order of the series and when was the first one released and this one?
So the first one was released in the fall of 2019. and that's called Dragon Ripper. The second one, The Widowing, was released just a couple of weeks ago. It's been done for a couple of years, I guess, but it was just released a couple of weeks ago, and I've been working on the third book in the series. I plan on this being at least a dozen books in the series before I'm done with. Yeah.
How very cool.
It seems like a long time between the first and the second, but actually I write pretty quickly. I will be able to get that done.
Do you have an estimated guess of when the third one will be done?
I'm hoping within the next 12 months we'll have the third one out.
Well, without giving too much away, can you tell us about the first book in this series, since in the podcast today we're mainly talking about the second book?
Sure. So the first book is called Dragon Ripper, and it's where my narrator, Madeline Barquist, meets Astrea Holmes, and through various, complications, she ends up helping Astrea to solve a crime in Victorian London, and it has to do with there is what seems to be a large monster, like a large snake-like creature, eviscerating women in the alleyways. And so there's some people think it's Jack the Ripper. Well, Maddie, of course, knows it's not Jack the Ripper because she killed Jack the Ripper. So she knows that's not who that is. But so she's really interested in finding out what the heck is going on. And they solve that. It involves a crime syndicate in Whitechapel. It involves the opium trade. The Chinese opium trade is heavily involved in this story.
Wow, that is so cool. So many different intersections and stuff like that. I love the history. And I delve really deeply in the history. And people who write reviews of that first book, and the second one too, but the first book, they talk about how much they enjoy learning new things. And I'll tell you, all of that is pretty deeply researched. That's amazing. That's one of my favorites, is when books intersect with history or musicals, like Six the Musical or Hamilton or anything like that. I just love when history, like actual things, has happened and it's in the books. It's my favorite.
Right. So it educates, but doesn't bore you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You learn something and you're entertained at the same time.
Yes. Kind of. I remember the first time I watched the TV show, The Tudors, and I'm like watching, I'm like, did that actually happen? And I just was like, whoa, this is true. Yes. Especially British history is so fascinating, and there's so much of it. Just being there in December, it was fascinating. Like, we were in the museum, and I remember looking at this rug, and I was like, this rug is older than our country. It's just, there's so much deep history there. So I think that's super awesome. Right. Okay, so what inspired you to set the windowing in Victorian London, and how does the setting enhance the mystery and atmosphere of the book? So
because I decided to do Sherlock Holmes, everything evolves around the timeline, the chronicle for Sherlock Holmes. And so I part of my research, I found out, when did this happen in it? Which Sherlock story happened here? What happened there? So I could tie that to Sherlock. I also needed to tie it to when Jack the Ripper was, committing his crime. So Dragon Ripper starts about 1 year after Jack the Ripper is gone. And so then I did some pretty deep research into what was going on in London in 1890 and in 1891. And so The Widowing ends up being, it's about really a murder that happens among suffragists, because that was a very big deal in London in the 1890s.
Wow, that's incredible. So how long is the time lapse between the first and second book?
It's just a couple of weeks.
Just a couple of weeks. Okay.
So it is. The way I end the first book, I end it with a hint of what the mystery is going to be that we're going to work in the second. I did the same thing in the second for what's going to be happening in the third, where they're going to be going in the third.
Okay, that's so cool. What does your writing process look like? Do you plot everything out ahead of time, or do you prefer to let the story develop organically?
No, I do plot it out. You have to, if you're writing mystery. You have to have your characters figured out. You have to know, when you're going to have some big climactic event occur. I mean, they're pretty tightly plotted out before I start writing. Yeah. And that's the hardest part, really, is getting that plotted out. That's the reason I haven't gotten too far yet in my book 3, is because there's things that I still have to put into that outline that I haven't quite gotten my handle around yet. I will.
That's amazing. It's really cool to hear the background of like how you do that all. Okay, how do you approach writing historical fiction and blending it with crime and mystery elements? What kind of research goes into creating the historical backdrop for your novels?
Well, I'll start reading something and there'll be a reference to something and I'll think, oh gosh, that sounds interesting. And so this started in Dragon Ripper somewhere, I don't know where, I encountered a little piece about the London Zoo. And then I started thinking, what the heck was the London Zoo like at that time? And then I started doing research into the London Zoo and oh my gosh, they hadn't really figured out how to do zoos yet. I learned that when the zoo, for the first 50 years of the zoo, most of the animals would die every year because they hadn't figured out how to do heating and ventilation and that sort of thing. I mean, all of this stuff. And so in the London Zoo ends up becoming part of my book. That's part of book 2, actually, is some of it takes place in the London Zoo. So, sometimes I get books. Sometimes I go down rabbit holes online. A lot of times I go down rabbit holes online. And I really enjoy that. I just really, really enjoy just spending hours reading about this arcane bit of strange history. I love that. And then finding ways to, and sometimes, you read a whole lot about something and there's only just a couple little bits of it that you kind of throw in your book, because it's not my intention to make this a history book. It's my intention to make this a murder mystery.
But to add history elements.
With just enough history in there for verisimilitude and for interest. And so that's how I do that.
That's incredible. When we were in London, we went to the Tower of London and learned about all the animals, that were there at first and then how they transferred to the zoo. And that was fascinating. Yes. And did you learn about the ravens?
Yes. I've been thinking to find those ravens in one of my stories one of these days.
Absolutely. That would be really cool. It's just fun for me because I just was there. And so it's fun to think about it. How do you approach character growth across the series, especially when dealing with such complex character backgrounds like Maddie?
Maddie, I'm trying to make her be more brave over the course of the stories. So, I mean, she, like a lot of people who've been in deep trauma, because she lived her life in trauma, she can respond out of a gut response. And she kills people sometimes, but it's because this emergency situation is in front of her and she reacts. I'm trying to build in her an ability to be more thoughtful and put herself out there in situations intentionally. So that's what I'm kind of doing with her. So, for example, the only person who knows that Maddie is the daughter of Jack the Ripper and killed Jack the Ripper is Sherlock Holmes. Astrea doesn't know that by the end of book 1. That continues through book 2. At some point, though, Maddie is going to have to open up to her best friend and let her know that this is part of who she is. So there's that kind of acknowledgement of who she is and accepting that and stepping forward. Astrea, she's a really interesting character, and we learn about Astrea really through her relationships with the servants in her house, her relationships with her brothers, and her relationships with the suffragists that we meet. In England, it was suffragist, and in the U.S., it was suffragettes. And so I have it clear in the book, but when I talk, I get it confused sometimes. She's growing as well. We're going to learn a little bit more about both of them, I think, in book 3, and certainly by book 4. One of them we will learn that one of them is has a sexuality that's probably not too accepted back then. So, I mean, we're going to be learning more about them.
Oh, that's so cool. This goes into my next question where it says, can you give us an insight into the relationship between those two and how do their personalities complement each other while solving mysteries?
They trust each other completely. Astrea brings an excitement into Maddie's life and also a kindness into Maddie's life that she hasn't had. Having Maddie in Astrea's life allows Astrea to achieve the detective kinds of adventures she wants, because Astrea is this little doll-like person. She's just this little tiny little person with a little high, voice and so on. Maddie's almost 6 foot tall. She's a veterinarian. She's very strong. And so she's able to be like the security guard for Astrea. So if they go into dangerous situations, Astrea feels safe because Maddie's there, and Maddie's always really good at keeping them safe. Astrea trusts Maddie with information more than Maddie trusts Astrea. And we'll see how that evolves over time.
I'm so excited to see how that all plays out. So Madeline is not only a police veterinarian, but is also the daughter of Jack the Ripper. How do you balance her dark family history with her role as a detective and a veterinarian?
That's her dark side that she carries with her. She's always wondering if she's going to turn into, a monster like her father was. I mean, she's killed, I think, by the end of this book, 5 or 6 people. And she worries that that's going to be a problem for her. What her idea of just joy would be just to create like an animal sanctuary where the horses could run free because she sometimes, back then, horses didn't live to be very long. They were really, the kind of work that they had to undergo was very punishing. They didn't live more than 3 or 4 years. And so she gets attached to these horses, and she would like to have the opportunity to let them live a longer life. She can't. That's not part of her reality of her life. So, I mean, she does have to struggle between what she would like to see in the world and the world that she lives in. It was a hard time back then. You see children starving in the streets back then. It was a very, very difficult place and time to be.
Okay, what can readers expect from the future of the Detectivist series, and any hints about upcoming books or new directions for Maddie or Astrea?
So book 3, the way I have book 3 planned is going to take place in a girls' school. And the reason I'm having a really good time with that is because there's been some thefts going on. And so they're called, it's Astrea's brother Mycroft is the one who finds these cases for them. And so, because one of his friends will come and say, that is a problem. So anyway, he's been asked to kind of find some way to solve who the heck is stealing the stuff at this girls' school that is located inside this old castle. So Astrea and Maddie have to go undercover. Maddie gets to go in as the music teacher because Maddie could play piano. Astrea actually is a much finer piano teacher or player than Maddie is, but because Astrea is this little tiny doll-like person, Astrea is expected to go undercover as a student. And there's nothing that she would hate more than being forced to have to be a schoolgirl again. And I'm having just a really good time with that because Astrea is so angry that her brother's making her go undercover like she's 15 years old again.
I can see that. How fun. That will be exciting to read that. Do you plan on writing any other genres or exploring any other historical time periods in any future projects?
So my first book, very different, is called Mary and the Goddess of Ephesus. And I came up with this. I was a seminary student for a period of time. So I have a pretty decent background in biblical history and in New Testament history. And so my son and I went to Ephesus which is in Turkey in 2009. And what fascinated me that I had never been aware of is that there is a tradition in Ephesus that Mary, the mother of Jesus, went to live there, that John, the beloved disciple, brought her there after the crucifixion. Well, Ephesus is also where the great goddess Artemis was everything. The greatest of all the seven wonders of the ancient world was the great temple of Artemis in Ephesus. The priestess of Artemis in Ephesus was a leader in the community. I mean, it was big. Everything was about Artemis in Ephesus. And the idea that the mother of Jesus would have lived in a community predominated by worship of the great goddess was hugely fascinating to me. So anyway, that's what Marian, the goddess of Ephesus, came out of. But as part of that, then I realized what I'd like to do is do 2 more books in that series. The second would be The Death of Paul, which would take place in Rome. And then the third one would be Bishop of Ephesus, which would be the last part of the life of St. John. So one of these days I'll get those ones done.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So have you added history elements into all of your books? And is that like one of your favorite things?
It is one of my favorite things. The other couple books I have out there are contemporary, but really I enjoy writing historical stuff. I just really love the research. Really love it.
That's so cool. Well, people like me who enjoy reading this type of stuff, we thank you for that. What is the most surprising or unexpected feedback you've received from readers about the series so far?
Oh my goodness. I'd have to think about that. I tend to be pretty self-critical. It's going to sound weird, but the thing that's been most surprising but most joyous for me about the series so far is really the overwhelming positive response I've gotten about it. You know, I have almost 900 ratings for Dragon Ripper. I have almost 900 ratings on Amazon and almost 500 on Goodreads, and they're overwhelmingly positive. I got 4.6 out of 5 on Goodreads and 4.9 out of 5 on Amazon. So far, Widowing that just came out a few weeks ago, I think I have 18 ratings. That's all I have on there so far, but it's 4.9 out of 5. So that is, I mean, the positive reinforcement I'm getting from that's been the surprise for me, because I am pretty critical of my own work.
I can understand how that goes. Well, I'm so happy that you're getting such great reviews and positive things that all the people that have been reading it have been saying. That's so wonderful. Congratulations on your success with that. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know about this book or anything about you?
I still have a day job, and right now I probably sound a little bit tired. I am. I'm running for re-election as county commissioner right now, and I was up last night at a candidates forum. So I'm like, but it's a very busy life. But last night, one of the things that I was asked, that all the candidates were asked, it was an interesting question. I'd never gotten this at a candidates forum before. It said, if you lose, what are you going to do? That was an easy answer for me. I said, I'm going to write. I explained, because I keep these two parts of my life completely separate. And even though Widowing was released just a couple of weeks ago, I have not talked about it in the community, because I don't want to confuse my constituents. And so I told the constituents in this forum about my 2 books and told them how they can go on and get them. And I said, that's what I will do if I lose. I'm a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the response with that from other people?
They were, I think, kind of impressed and surprised that I do that. They all know I write, because one of the things I do, I write a newsletter every single week that tells my constituents exactly what the county commissioners did that week, what we're doing next week, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so they know that I know how to put words on paper, but that's not fiction. They did not know about my skill set with fiction.
Well, hopefully you get some new readers from that.
Could happen.
That's amazing. All right. Well, where can our viewers find your books?
Right now, the new one I think is just up on Amazon, and it's just up on Kindle. We haven't released it yet in paperback. We haven't released it yet in audiobook. We shall probably November, those things. I think Barnes and Noble certainly, I believe, also carries Dragon Ripper.
Is Dragon Ripper on Audible?
Dragon Ripper is on Audible, yeah, and it's also on paper and in Kindle.
Great. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you'll do an audio version for the second one as well?
Yes, absolutely. We'll do an audio version. I really enjoyed the audio version.
Are you narrating it yourself?
No. No, we hired someone who, I don't remember if she's a British person or has a great British accent. I don't remember anyway, but it's done.
Sure. Yeah.
It's done in that way. Yeah. That kind of authenticity is important to me. The book is written using British English, both of these books. And so, for example, a tiny example, they don't put periods after Mr. or Mrs. I mean, that's just the tiniest example. And they have words that are spelled different. And there's words they use that are different than our words and so on. And trying to be, do that in a legitimate way is an interesting challenge too.
I'm sure.
But that's important to me. That authenticity is really important to me.
Well, that is really cool that you're putting all that extra effort into it as well, including all the history stuff. That's a lot that you're doing, but it's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us at all?
Only that right now you can get the books for 99 cents in Kindle. They're doing that as a marketing thing. So you could get both those books for less than $2 on Kindle right now. So this is the time to get them.
Okay. You heard it from her.
It will not it won't always be that. So this is the time to get them.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Melanie, for coming and talking with me about this book. I can't wait for to dive into this a little bit more, and hopefully you get some new readers from it too.
I'd really appreciate thank you, Brandi. I've had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun getting to talk with Melanie, and I hope you enjoyed that interview too. It was really fun to hear her creative process behind the book and how she came up with the characters and all of that. And I just really loved it. So let's go ahead and get into our podcast episode today. But just as a spoiler warning, we are talking about the second book today, The Widowing. If you have not read the series yet, I highly recommend you go read The Dragon Ripper and then The Widowing, and then come back and join us for the conversation. So let's get into our episode, but let's kick off things with an overview. The Widowing transports us to Victorian London, where our protagonist, Melanie Barquist, has some very intriguing family ties. She's the daughter of none other than Jack the Ripper. But this isn't your typical crime novel. Madeline works as a police veterinarian, and together with her detectivist partner, Astrea Holmes, she is pulled into solving the murder of Lady Deborah Peachman, a suffragist leader who is killed with a hat pin during an assault on Parliament. The investigation starts as a political murder mystery, but Melanie Bacon does not stop there. As Madeline and Astrea dig deeper, they discover an even darker, more dangerous killer lurking in the shadows of society. Soon, the very leaders of London's suffrage and temperance movements grow nervous as secrets come to life that could tear their reputations apart. Now, let's talk about the characters, because that's really where this novel shines. First, we have Madeline Barquist. Madeline is a fascinating character because not only is she tied to one of the most infamous serial killers in history, but she's also a determined, resourceful investigator in her own right. There's an undeniable tension between her past and her present. Her role as a detective contrasts sharply in the shadow of her lineage. Astrea Holmes, her detectivist partner, brings a cool, methodical edge to the duo. If Maddie is a bit of a loose cannon, Astrea is the balance, calm, sharp, and always observing. The dynamic between these two makes for an engaging and often suspenseful partnership. As they dive deeper into the mystery, we get to see both of their personal strengths and vulnerabilities come into play. So now let's talk about themes and the historical context. The Victorian era isn't just a backdrop in The Widowing, it's a living, breathing element of the story. Melanie Bacon skillfully incorporates the suffragist movement and the fight for women's rights, adding layers of tension and conflict to the plot. The political atmosphere is intense, and the hatpin murder at the heart of the story is symbolic of the era's weaponized femininity. Women in this time were often seen as defenseless, yet they wielded surprising power, and Melanie Bacon explores this in fascinating ways. The suffragist leaders in the book, though champions of women's rights, are shown to have their own flaws, secrets, and struggles. It's a reminder that even those who fight for justice can have complicated, sometimes dark motivations. And when someone is murdered, everyone becomes a suspect. One of the strongest aspects of this novel is its tight pacing and suspense. The investigation of Lady Peachman's murder feels like a ticking clock, and as more clues are revealed, you realize that there is just more at stake than just this one death. The suffragist movement, London's temperance community, and the detectives themselves all become embroiled in a dangerous game of deception. And let's not forget that hat pin, a weapon not often seen in murder mysteries. It's subtle yet deadly, perfectly reflecting the hidden dangers that women in this era often faced, as well as the power they wielded behind the scenes. So let's take a look at what some people are saying about this book. According to the reviews on NetGalley, readers are loving the dark, suspenseful tone of the book. One reviewer calls it a fantastic concept for the daughter of Jack the Ripper, highlighting how the story takes full advantage of this connection to craft a complex, layered narrative. Another review praises it as a gripping crime drama game, but edgy, making it clear that the fans of historical mysteries will not be disappointed by the intricate plot and character development. So let's talk about what to expect from the series. This is only the second book in the Detectivist series, and it's clear that Melanie Bacon is just getting started. Fans of the first book, Dragon Ripper, will be thrilled to know that The Widowing expands on the worlds and the characters, building deeper relationships and unraveling even more mysteries. And based on the ending of The Widowing, it seems like there's plenty more in store for Maddie and Astrea. And as you heard from Melanie Bacon herself, she plans on there being many, many more books in the series, which is very exciting. So, if you are a fan of historical fiction, crime mysteries, or simply love a well-crafted, character-driven story, The Widowing is one to add to your reading list for this fall. Melanie Bacon has crafted a novel that blends real historical events with fictional drama, all while keeping the readers on the edge of their seats. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope this breakdown has piqued your interest in The Widowing by Melanie Bacon. Be sure to grab a copy. It was just released on August 27th, and let us know what you think. That's it for today's episode of Dragons and Spaceships. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the realms and the starships. And don't forget to find us on social media for more quick and engaging book reviews and recommendations. Until next time, happy reading, stay curious, and keep exploring the fantastical and the futuristic. And may your TBR pile never stop growing.